Here with Coach Blaine McCorkle as Demons continue their alternating home away trips the rest of the season. This week, back at home against UIW. We'll get to that probably pretty quickly because we won't spend a lot of time on last week's game. Coach, anytime it's on the road, it's tough in the Southland, and it just was not our night in a lot of respects in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, it was definitely not our night, and I think there's a lot of factors that played into that, and those are things that as we grow this program, we've got to correct in a hurry. From a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, I thought we did have a great week of practice. I thought it was one of our best weeks of practice we've had since we've been here, and then somewhere along the way, it didn't translate to the game. And I think we've got to do a better job maturing as a team when you play a team that is perceived maybe not to be like the other teams that you've played. They're still McNeese State. They're still in the Southland. They're still really, really big and really, really physical. And we're not. And we've got to remember where we are sometimes. And I think a little bit of confidence at Lamar, even though we didn't play completely well, we didn't win the game at Lamar. A couple pats on the backs, a couple, guys feeling good, and then, some external factors, to use Nick Saban's rat poison a little bit. People tell them, maybe McNeese isn't that good. Well, they are pretty good. There's a lot of season left. Just because their record's not great to the point doesn't mean they're not going to end up having a pretty good year. They very well could go 500, which is whatever for McNeese. But they were big, they were physical. We were outmatched across the board. And I think a lot of places we're still playing really, really hard not to lose instead of playing really, really hard to win. And there's a big difference. You can play hard and put out a great effort, but not in a winning effort. And that's hard for people to wrap their mind around, but that's real. And those are things that we've got to be better at and mature as a team. And a lot of that too is youth and inexperience and learning how to prepare and approach every game the same way with the same intensity. And hopefully we learn some valuable lessons from that one.
And it's a really also disappointing because obviously the interception on the second play of the game for us, Caden picks the route on going the other way. Obviously, wish we could have taken it all the way for the touchdown. Go ahead, score first for the second week in a row, and just that's the hot start, so to speak. And then it just kind of fell flat, which is another disappointing part of it too. And it's not oftentimes in week 9 of the season where you're getting guys making their debuts, but we had a handful of guys doing that as well. And because of one of the trends, unfortunately, this season has been injuries have bitten us in a lot of places. And it's good for those guys to get that experience, but when you're plugging in guys that are first snaps and they're more times than not on this team, freshmen, it's a tough thing.
Yeah, well, a great example of that, Colby Cage, who you interviewed here earlier, I think he's the only defensive back we've had to play in every game. Yeah. Every other defensive back has missed games along the way or multiple games along the way. So that's just, one group to use as an example, but every position group really is kind of that way to a certain degree, and it's kind of gone through it with the injuries, and it's been frustrating, been hard, but, you'd like to say next man up, but where our program is right now in this building process, there is no next man. So you got to kind of patch some pieces together. So a lot of people, you have to play a younger guy this week, so you're going to replace a freshman with a freshman, right? And then this is not a woe is me. That's just where our program is and what we've got to continue to build our way out of. And we know that. But we did get some guys get some first snaps in there and get some opportunities. Tyler Welch got his first snaps there at cornerback, so good for him. I think he's going to be a good player in our future. So now he's felt Southland play. Got a tackle in there, good for him. Trevor Allen got a few more snaps. We're still going to protect his 4. He's got one more game he can play in. Rory Lambert in the offensive line is going to be really, really good for us. He's one of only 3 guys on our team that's over 300 pounds, which is wild to think about in Division I athletics. But he got in there and did a good job, and he can play the last 3 games and still keep his red shirt. And we plan on getting him in there a little bit, because I think he's got a bright future and can do some things. And there'll be a few others probably the next couple of weeks that we pop in there on some special teams and things like that. So good for those guys to get an opportunity, but we got to get healthy to finish this thing out.
And I think it also kind of plays into that overarching theme or mentality that you, the coaching staff, especially these young guys, fans, everybody is continually trying to develop is patience. How do you work on that? How do you continue to build that and realize where we are and where we're working towards? It's not a quick process.
It's not a quick process, and patience is one of those tricky things. I learned a long time ago. Don't ever pray for patience because God will teach it to you. And I think too many people around here have been praying for patience. They need to stop. But it's a process. And, we know, we've talked about it. We talked about it in our team meeting to a great extent last night about who our program is, how we got where we are, and where we're going. And I think some guys realize we've actually made a lot of progress in a lot of areas over the last 2 years. Unfortunately, because of where we've come from and the way we're having to rebuild this program, the last thing to show up sometimes is the school board, because there were so many things we had to get in place as a program before we could get there. And those things are brutally hard to go through. It makes the wait brutally hard, but our kids are positive. They're staying in here. They're fighting. And I think as a whole, our team really sees the big picture, and a lot of people have made the comment, well, last year in year one, you kind of laid your foundation. I think we're laying our foundation in year two, because in year one, we were tearing down the old debris, and I think that's real, So as a whole, inside these walls, our program is very encouraged, and they see the big picture, and they know where we're going. They know we're kind of going through it right now, but there's some really, really good days ahead. Just looking at our roster and who's playing and how young they are and the level that they're producing at right now. By contrast, kind of segueing into UIW, as we did our own 2 deep before they released theirs, we had their starting defense had 10 seniors and 1 sophomore. So that's not us. That's not where we're at. Good for them. And that's the way most of the Southland is, and that's where we'll get to. And for them, those guys go down and they have another guy ready to go, and they kind of work their way up through their program. But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So we keep these guys here and positive. Those days are coming sooner than later.
Yeah. A little bit about UIW. Obviously they're probably riding high off the win against Lamar last week. But just looking at them from an offensive side, you look at it and they like to spread the ball around in the air, and that's going to be. You already mentioned it, the way our secondary has been challenged this year. Probably one of the keys to the game is so many guys, so many options in the passing game. It's going to be a tough challenge.
Yeah, they spread it around. They get a lot of guys the ball. They do a good job. They've got a bucket full of receivers that they can get the ball to. And I think they've had some injuries at that position a little bit themselves. They've had a lot of guys in and out. Quarterback is special. They changed quarterbacks earlier in the year, so they're actually playing with a redshirt freshman quarterback now as well. Transferred in from Central Florida, I believe, but he can use his legs. He can throw it. He's a dynamic football player. He's going to be really, really good in this league. But he's got a lot of dudes around him. He's got guys he can get it to, and he's got a big athletic offensive line in front of him that takes care of him and allows him to do his thing. So we'll definitely have our work cut out for us on defense for sure.
Offensively for us, feel like there's an opportunity there for Abram this week. I know he wants to come back and have a little bit of better outing they did last week, kind of back to what we saw against Lamar. What's it going to take for him to get to that, and the offense as a whole?
Well, we've got to help him a little bit as coaches. He's a kid that definitely can do some things, as he's shown before. And week to week, as the flow of the game changes, we've got to be able to adapt a little bit better to help him out. McNeese, give them credit, did some things to take him away, and we've got to be able to adjust to those better. I think we did have some good ideas to do that, but it was a little bit too little, too late. But the key for our offense is just consistency. Just consistency. Like I said, last week we had a great week of practice, and it didn't really show up on Saturday. But we've got to back up that week of practice again. That doesn't mean you don't have to practice hard this week, and put together a good plan and give him a chance to do some things that he's capable of doing, because he's very talented. He's tough. He's gritty. He's a competitor, and he can make plays. But we've got to, as a whole offense, be more consistent to give him the opportunity to do that, which in turn opens up opportunities for other guys.
Yeah. I know it was good to see Cody get in there and make some catches. I think he had 4 catches for about 40 yards last week. Kind of get him going a little bit.
Yeah. He's one that all year long you kind of been waiting on kind of those breakout moments, and he's slowly getting better and growing up and maturing, and he can definitely make a play. He's long. He's got some range. He's got really good hands. So hopefully we can see him continue to progress through the rest of this year, because he definitely can make a play, and we need him to.
Yeah. Coach, as always, thank you for this time.
Thank you.